I believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. But I also detest the sort of bashing and vilifying of gays and lesbians because I think it's unduly divisive. It's unnecessary. Most gays and lesbians are simply seeking basic recognition of their rights. We've got to make sure that everybody is equal under the law. And the civil unions that I proposed would be equivalent in terms of making sure that all the rights that are conferred by the state are equal for same-sex couples as well as for heterosexual couples. Now, with respect to marriage, it's my belief that it's up to the individual denominations to make a decision as to whether they want to recognize marriage or not. With respect to gay marriage, I do not support gay marriage, but I support a very strong version of civil unions where I think the state has to recognize the same rights and responsibilities for gay people, same-sex couples, as they do for anybody else. Because the state is not a religious institution, and I believe in equal protection under the law, and so making sure that the right to transfer property, hospital visitation, non-discrimination, all those principles apply to same-sex couples, I think is important.
Define marriage.
I believe that marriage is the union between a man and a woman.
Would you support a constitutional amendment with that definition?
No, I would not. I am not somebody who promotes same-sex marriage, but I do believe in civil unions. I do believe that we should not, that for gay partners to want to visit each other in a hospital, for the state to say, you know what, that's all right. I don't think in any way inhibits my core beliefs about what marriage are.
I believe that gay couples deserve the same legal rights as every other couple in this country. You should never have to look over your shoulder to be gay in the United States of America. I issued an order so that any hospital in America that accepts Medicare or Medicaid, and that means just about every hospital, has to treat gay partners just as they do straight partners, because nobody should have to produce a legal contract to hold the hand of the person that they love.
Well, it doesn't really matter who gets the ticket because anybody could be a better president than President Bush at this point. And let's focus on just a Democrat winning in 2008 and put aside everything pre-primary
But that's not the question.
politics.
I said, who would you, if you had to pick somebody?
I'm sorry, what?
If you had to pick somebody, who would you pick?
I'd pick a Democrat. Well, let's face it, I mean, all of the college Democrats, we're so behind just winning a Democrat in 2008. It's time for the Democrat to win. Let's focus on that first.
But I also got to say this. I think that the Democrats have an opportunity right now to come forward and seize this opportunity. But I think so many of them are concerned about getting votes that they're trying to see which way is going to go before they come out and take a political stand.
They're all trying to reinvent themselves. None of them have any core beliefs. There's nothing you can depend on. This is like George W. Bush running in 2000 for a more modest foreign policy. There is nothing any of them believe in other than trying to get a monopoly on some kind of power in Washington.
If we don't stop extending our troops all around the world in nation-building missions, then we're going to have a serious problem coming down the road, and I'm going to prevent that.
These people sell off a little bit of themselves each time they stick out their hand and they agree to do something for somebody to collect the money. And by the time they're in office, there's nothing left. No wonder they have no core beliefs. Slice by slice by slice, they sell themselves away. Hillary is no different. We are faced with a really, really tough challenge of people here that want to expand the war, continue to ruin brand name America, and decapitalize this country. And I think it's time the American people wake up to the whole bunch of them, the R's and the D's alike.
Had my judgment prevailed back in 2002, we wouldn't be in this predicament. I was opposed to this war from the start. and have been opposed to this war consistently. But I have also said that there are no good options now. There are bad options and worse options.
Let me just tell you, I think Obama has given himself too much credit for his opposition to the war. It was very convenient for him to say that he opposed it before he was elected. But since he has been a United States Senator, he has fallen right in line on every vote to continue the war, authorize the war. His voting record on the war is identical to Hillary Clinton's. It's not as though there was ever a proposal to strand those Americans halfway around the world and leave them, but the war needs to be stepped down and defunded, and he hasn't done anything to get it done.
4 of these people here will say that it's George Bush's war. It was facilitated by the Democrats. They brought the resolution up. One of them co-authored it here, standing here, and so it's sure it's George Bush's war, but it's the Democrats' war also. There's information coming out. Senator Durbin, Mr. Shrum in his book, that really points out that these people knew that there was 2 sets of intelligence going on at the same time. And they made a political decision to vote the way they voted. A political decision that cost, stop and think, we have killed more Americans than was done on the 11th of September. More Americans died because of their decision.
And you now say there are 2 parties in Congress right now, big government conservatives and big government liberals, and the only difference is what they want to spend money on.
So I would say that in some ways, yes, they have some differences, but in other ways, I think Republicans have grown to act just like Democrats.
And I have my suspicion that whether Democrats or Republicans, they're not going to get out of Iraq even after the election. I don't care who's elected. We went in there for the control of oil. This was an oil war by George Bush. The Democrats bought into it in the Congress, and you think that they're going to give up this control of oil?
Will you pledge that by January 2013, the end of your first term, more than 5 years from now, there will be no U.S. troops in Iraq?
Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today? Tommy Nation Politics.
The president calling the president of Russia, maybe he thinks he's a killer. He goes on to say that Putin will pay the price for meddling in US elections. He thinks Putin is a killer. Kevin, walk me through the relationship with Russia and the United States now. This is a vice president, a former vice president that used to serve for a former president who used to say that the situation with Russia was yesteryear's story. It's not anymore.
President Biden, given the increased tension during the election of the last cycle, has a lot of pressure for how he's going to be dealing with Russia and obviously Ukraine as well. So for him to be using that language, for him to be taking that rhetorical approach is a clear sign of who he is aligning himself with in Congress, including the likes of some more hawkish members of his party, as well as from a foreign policy perspective, hawkish, as well as from the Republican centers as well. In addition to that, I would also note that Secretary Blinken, traveling in his first overseas trip earlier this week, making a stop in Tokyo, Japan, also putting some pressure on China. This is, without question, Jonathan, the most plain speak week for the administration, for them to articulate their views on both Russia and China.
Let's give the president a chance.
Governor Romney, I'm glad that you recognize that al-Qaeda is a threat, because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not al-Qaeda, you said Russia.
This is, without question, our #1 geopolitical foe. They fight every cause for the world's worst actors. The idea that he has some more flexibility in mind for Russia is very, very troubling indeed.
Well, you think Russia's a bigger foe right now than, let's say, Iran or China or North Korea? Is that what you're suggesting, Governor?
Well, I'm saying in terms of a geopolitical opponent, the nation that lines up with the world's worst actors. Of course, the greatest threat that the world faces is a nuclear Iran, and nuclear North Korea is already troubling enough.
The 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back because, the Cold War has been over for 20 years.
Let me talk to you about climate change, which is, as you point out, something you're passionate about. You guys did some very far-reaching environmental reforms when you really led the country in terms of setting standards and for the reduction of greenhouse gases. You did a kind of cap-and-trade system here and so on. And you, even after you left office, you were in Paris promoting the Paris Accord that was signed. You mentioned earlier that the president, you didn't support him because of his position on these issues. And to give him credit, he's held fast to that. He withdrew from the Paris Accords. The EPA is repealing many of the emission standards that came into being under the Obama administration, and now at war with California over its standards. Can this momentum be turned back?
Well, I think it's unfortunate that he's going in that direction. And whatever the reason is, it doesn't really matter, because the fact of the matter is we have to adjust to that new environment. And I tell everyone wherever I go and hold a speech about the environment that we cannot rely just on one person. And we cannot rely on the federal government. And this is not just Trump. Remember that when I was governor, I fought the federal government also during my time, because the federal government said that you cannot have a waiver to regulate your own air because greenhouse gases is not a pollutant. And I said, what? Greenhouse gas is not a pollutant? No, it's not a pollutant. So we took them to court. Yeah. I mean, my own party was in control then, right? And it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court of the United States decided that yes, greenhouse gases is a pollutant. Well, duh. I mean, how much brain power does it take? It's crazy because we are polluting the world, and it's not just about global climate change, but it is the amount of people that it kills every day all over the world. I mean, every year, 7 million people die because of pollution. So if the responsibility of government is to protect people, then why would I let that happen?
Yeah. You mentioned that you took on Republican administrations over this issue. I saw a poll earlier, a couple of months ago, and it said the single biggest issue dividing Democrats and Republicans is this one, climate change.
But David, first of all, I think that environmentalists have done a terrible job in selling this, because the more they talk about global climate change, which no one understands what that is, they talk about what's going to happen 20 years from now and the sea level rising and the polar bear and all of this kind of things. No one cares about that when you want to have a job and you want to bring food on the table today.
Right.
But what people care about is if you say, this is going to cause cancer. This is going to make your child have asthma early on. And as soon as they hear the health aspect of it, because that's how we sold it to the people in California, this is the difference. It has to be sold the right way. It has to be communicated the right way to the people, not talk about something that is happening 20 years from now, but today. Every day, 19,000 people are dying because of pollution worldwide. And this is an embarrassment that politicians and leaders cannot sit down and really fix this problem once and for all.
Let me just ask you this. You said earlier, politics sucks. And I bet you there are a lot of people who are nodding. But it's important for people, if we don't have faith in this process of democracy, which I know you value, it just doesn't work. But how do you restore faith in that democracy? Because all over the world we're seeing liberal democracies on the run. You're in Europe a lot. You're familiar with what's going on there. Give me a hopeful thought on this.
I don't understand when you say democracy is being challenged here, because it's not, as far as I'm concerned. I think the liberal politics is being challenged here, because I think that people are sick and tired everywhere of what was going on. And you see it in Germany, you see it in Austria, you see it in Hungary, you see it in England with Brexit and all this stuff, Italy, no matter where you go. People had enough. They said to themselves, how much longer can we take of we're ringing up a huge deficit every year, huge debt? Who is going to pay that off? When are we ever going to pay that off? They feel like there's too much spending going on and not enough kind of people sitting down and really agreeing and fixing problems and all this. So they're sick and tired, so they look for something else.
Right.
Okay, so it's not the democracy.
But that's something else they look for.
It's something else. What they're looking for the opposite. So they say, okay, if the liberal politics didn't work, let's get someone conservative.
But there's a difference between liberal and conservative. I mean, you may consider yourself a conservative, and I may consider myself a liberal. But when you have, for example, in Hungary or Poland, you have leaders who are cutting back on fundamental institutions, the courts, the media. That's a problem, isn't it?
Look, America sometimes makes a mistake to always think that only our rules and our way of government is perfect in the way we deal with issues. This is great for America, but the Hungarians deal differently with their issues. The Polish deal in a different way. The Italians deal in a different way. So they look at our system and they say, this is totally flawed. We look at their system and we say they're totally flawed. And Congress is getting an 18% approval rating. So that is a totally fixed system. So they over there looking at us and said, that's not what we want. A fixed system where you can't get rid of those politicians. This is why I say the most important thing is not politics. The most important thing is to go and to get off your couch and to do something about it.
Thank you and good afternoon. Sorry a little late, but we had an opportunity to meet with leaders of the AAPI community downstairs, and it was heart-wrenching to listen to them. As many of you know, we originally planned to hold a car rally to thank our supporters. But given the recent days, events of the recent days, we didn't feel it was appropriate. So we canceled that rally. But we want our supporters to know we'll come back and hold that rally another trip. But today, we want to speak about something else. I said from the beginning of my campaign for president that we needed to come together, that we needed to unite as one people, one nation, one America. I said in my kickoff speech in Philadelphia, I said that very same thing when I spoke at Gettysburg. I said that in my inaugural address. And I believe with every fiber on my being, there are simply some core values and beliefs that should bring us together as Americans. One of them is standing together against hate, against racism, the ugly poison that has long haunted and plagued our nation. The Vice President and I, as I said, met a little bit earlier, just before this, with leaders from the Asian American community here in Georgia. We talked about Tuesday's mass shooting, about another example of public health crisis of gun violence in this country. 8 people killed, 7 women, 6 were of Asian descent. All fellow Americans, each one of them we mourn. Their families are left with broken hearts and unanswered questions. And the investigation is ongoing, and the Vice President and I are being regularly updated by the Attorney General and the Director of the FBI, working closely with Governor Kemp and Mayor Bottoms and local officials. But whatever the motivation, we know this. Too many Asian Americans have been walking up and down the streets and worrying, waking up each morning the past year feeling their safety and the safety of their loved ones are at stake. They've been attacked, blamed, scapegoated, and harassed. They've been verbally assaulted, physically assaulted, killed. Documented incidents of hate against Asian Americans have seen a skyrocketing spike over the last year, let alone the ones that happened and never get reported. It's been a year of living in fear for their lives, just to walk down the street. Grandparents are afraid to leave their homes. Small business owners targeted and gunned down. Attacks on some of the most vulnerable people in our nation, the elderly, low-wage workers, and women. In fact, Asian American women suffer twice as many incidents of harassment and violence as Asian American men. We're learning again what we've always known. Words have consequences. It's the coronavirus, full stop. The conversation we had today with the AAPI leaders and that we're hearing all across the country is that hate and violence often hide in plain sight. It's often met with silence. That's been true throughout our history. But that has to change because our silence is complicity. We cannot be complicit. We have to speak out. We have to act. In my first week in office, I signed an executive order directing federal agencies to combat this resurgence of xenophobia. The Department of Justice is strengthening its partnership with the AAPI community to prevent these crimes, in addition to its other work to take on violent extremists and domestic terrorism. I'm calling on Congress to pass and get to my desk the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. And the House just passed the reauthorization for the Violence Against Women Act, a law I authored more than 25 years ago. It's one of my proudest legislative achievements. I call on the Senate to swiftly pass it and get it to my desk. But for all the good that laws can do, we have to change our hearts. Hate can have no safe harbor in America. It must stop. And it's on all of us together, to make it stop. Something else should bring us together, and that is a belief in science. Science isn't something that should divide us. There's nothing political about it. There's nothing partisan about it. One of America's best examples of commitment to science is headquartered right here in Atlanta, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The CDC represents the best of this nation, brilliant minds, deep faith in science, and a strong commitment to public service. We came here to thank them for all the work they do, and especially the work they've done over the course of this pandemic. We owe them and their families our gratitude. We wanted to convey to them the absolute commitment to give them everything they need to do their work and get it done, free of politics and guided by science. And because of them, we're making real progress. We just met my goal of administering 100 million shots before my first 100 days in office. We did it in about 60 days. We're not stopping now. The American Rescue Funds, more vaccines, more vaccination centers, and more increase in testing. It's going to help us accelerate our nationwide effort to reopen schools safely. Last week, I directed all states, tribes, and territories to make all adults eligible to be vaccinated no later than May 1. But while this is a time of optimism, it's not a time for relaxation. I need all Americans to keep doing your part. Wash your hands, stay socially distanced, keep masking up as recommended by the CDC, and get vaccinated when it's your turn. None of this is political. It's all science-based. But now is not the time to let our guard down. That's science-based as well. In the last week, we've seen increases in the number of cases in several states. Things may get worse as new variants of the virus spread. That's why we need to vaccinate as many people as quickly as we possibly can, because it's the best thing we can do to fight back against these variants. We have to beat this virus. We have to, and we will. But we'll do it by setting aside politics and embracing science. Another subject, the right to vote, that should bring us together as well. But it now divides us. This is a democracy. The right to vote is fundamental. The fact that there was a record turnout in America in the last election, in the midst of a pandemic, should be something we celebrated, not attacked. The fact that you held a free and fair election in Georgia that stood up to recount after recount, court case after court case, is something you should be proud of. The fact that your poll workers, your election workers, your volunteers, your local officials, your state officials, your courts stood up to the immense pressure with character and honesty and integrity helped save our democracy. And this country will long be grateful for it. But as this state, home to Martin Luther King and John Lewis, knows better than most, the battle for the right to vote is never, ever over. And it's not over here in this state of Georgia. So we're in a fight again. It's a fight we need to win. Because if anyone ever doubted that voting matters, Georgia just proved it did. If anyone ever wondered if one vote could make a difference, Georgia just proved it. 11,779 times. And if anyone ever wondered if voting can change a country, Georgia just proved it can. Because when you elected 2 new United States senators, you made it possible to pass the American Rescue Plan. Landmark legislation will not only meet the emergency we're in, but transform this nation. Starting with this, for those folks who either already have or will soon have $1,400 in their pockets, you can thank Senators Warnock and Ossoff. But for their votes, it would not have happened. What does that mean? It means 85% of the households in America will get that money. Here in Georgia, it means 88% of all adults and 88% of the children in this state will get that $1,400 as well. Just add it up. A typical family, 2 parents, 2 kids, earning $100,000 a year, each will get $1,400. That's $5,600 for that family that's in distress, trying to figure out how to pay their mortgage, pay their rent, keep food on the table. And that's not all. There's something called a child tax credit. What that basically means is you get a tax credit for every child you have. The American Rescue Plan expands that credit. It means that families of over 2 million children in Georgia will be eligible for an increase in that child tax credit of $1,600 per year, per child. And it's going to be delivered on a regular basis. So starting this summer, families with young kids will get $300 a month per child. This is going to lift 177,000 children in Georgia out of poverty. The American Rescue Plan expands coverage and reduces costs under the Affordable Care Act. So for a family of 4 earning $90,000 per year with insurance under the Affordable Care Act, they'll see about $200 a month off their monthly premiums. And for Georgia schools, the American Rescue Plan provides around $4 billion for Georgia's school children from grades K through 12 to help them reopen safely. And here's one of the biggest things for Georgia. Because of the American Rescue Plan, Georgia is now eligible for about $2 billion to expand Medicaid. What does that mean? It means another 500,000 Georgians will be covered all across this state with Medicaid that don't have it now. For your state and local governments, this is what it does. State government will get around $5 billion to make up for lost revenue. Local governments will get around $3.5 billion. That's going to make it possible to keep a lot of police officers, firefighters, teachers, and other first responders on the job. And here's one final thing the American Rescue Plan does. For the first time in a long time, it puts working families, the middle class, people who built this country first, not last. 66% of the tax breaks in this plan go to folks making $90,000 or less a year. And how much for the top 1%, where 83% of all the tax cut, there was the last president's tax cut? 0. Top 1% get 0. But the American Rescue Plan isn't only about putting money in the pockets, people's pockets. It also will create and spur economic growth in America. That's why major economists, left, right, and center, support this plan. Even Wall Street agrees. According to Moody's, this law will help America create 7 million new jobs by the end of the year. And we'll do it by rebuilding the backbone of this nation. The working people, the middle class, the people who built this country. It's about giving those people a fair shot for a change. It's about providing and proving to the American people that their government works and can deliver for them. Which brings me to my last point. The American Rescue Plan is a plan that brings America together and benefits all America. That's why so many polls show that over 70% of the country support it, including Democrats, Republicans, and independents. Maybe Republicans in Washington didn't vote for it, but the American Rescue Plan sure has brought the country together. And for me, that measure of unity, that's what matters. Let me end with this. There's so much we can do if we do it together. If we remember who we are, if we stand together against hate, once again believe and invest in science, we stand up for the right of all Americans to vote and have access to voting. If we remember, we're here to help all the people in this country, not just those few at the top. If we remember to do justice, love mercy, to walk humbly as fellow human beings and as fellow Americans. If we remember we're the United States of America, and that together, there's nothing, not a single thing we cannot do if we do it together.